Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and today I'm coming to you with the Day 12 news. This is covering the past 24 hours of the Ukraine conflict. We will be starting in the normal format today, where we cover the Kyiv events, the Sumy and Kharkiv area front and their events, and then we will go over the entire southern front and wrap up by answering as many questions as possible from the comments. As usual, I thank you all so much for watching. It's a great thing, and I love that a lot of people are appreciating my take and my opinions, although, don't take them and quote me on them. They're just for what they are. But if y'all believe that the news is good, make sure to like the video so that way it'll get out there to more people and more people can see the news. Anyways, moving on from that, we're going to start covering Zhytomyr today, and then we'll move on into Ukraine, so that way this is more of a fluid clockwise motion instead of going all the way around and then popping back up to Zhytomyr. And so today we can see that there has been smoke billowing out of a fire in Zhytomyr. The source of it is unknown, but I'll let y'all see the video, and to me it kind of looks like an oil fire, but I'll let y'all see it. As we know from videos all across the country, we've seen a lot of oil silos get hit recently, and based off of that, due to the kind of like color of the smoke and stuff, I'm believing that that probably is another oil silo that was hit overnight, but I can't really confirm that to be sure. It could really be anything. So moving on from that, we're finally going to move on to the area of Kyiv today, which has surprisingly been relatively quiet today in terms of every other day. As you can see, all the markers from the previous days on this map. And if y'all want to know where to get this map, make sure to go join the Discord in the link below, and you can actually find the map in the Discord server. But nonetheless, there has been a lot of activity today. We do know that Russian tanks have been seen moving near Kyiv in this video. This isn't anything new. We've seen tanks moving in the area this entire time. But it appears, based off of what we're seeing here, that they are moving through the 40-mile long convoy, because it's on both sides of the road. So I'm guessing that they may have cleared the road, although on satellite it looked like it wasn't clear at all. But nonetheless, I'm not even sure if that's on the same highway. So regardless, I'll just let y'all see the video. So anyways, it's just nothing more than some T80s, BMP2s, and it looks like maybe even a Shilka? I don't know if that's a Shilka or not, I can't really tell. But nonetheless, one thing I would also like to focus on is that you can see that there's been a large amount of snow, and over the past day, and I'm trying to work on finding out a way to present this information to y'all, because at the moment I don't really have a hardcore way to do this easily, but a snowstorm rolled in from the area of the Balkans over the entirety of Ukraine, so now most of Ukraine is covered in snowfall. Now, the problem with that, for the Russians at least, is that the temperature in Ukraine right now isn't going to be cold enough to keep the ground, to keep the snow from melting and to keep the ground solid. It's just high enough of a temperature that the snow will melt, and it will help to contribute to Rasputitsa across the entire country now. So now I'm going to start expecting that the progress that they're making on the south, the little bit that they are making, which we'll get to in a bit, is going to be seriously hindered now, because the ground down there will not be firm anymore. It'll now be in that Rasputitsa muddy slush kind of situation. So I don't really think that we'll start seeing a lot of advances over the ground here in the next few days. Moving on from that, we can see more closer to Kyiv that a Ukrainian MLRS, which we've seen very little action of on video, was firing from the area of Kyiv towards Russian forces near Irpin. Anyways, I'll just show the video.
По-моему, в нашу сторону полетело.
As you can see, the rocket fire in the distance.
Не ругайся, пожалуйста, на видео. Какой ужас.
Now, that may just be an advantageous firing of MLRS at troops that they have verified location of and they know they can destroy really easily. But one thing I can take from that is that we haven't seen a lot of Ukrainian artillery in action over the past week and a half. And perhaps if Ukrainian artillery is starting to operate in higher frequency and we're seeing that on video, it may suggest that this is infantry being supported by artillery bombardments while attacking Russian units. I don't have any information to confirm that, and that's entirely my opinion and kind of like my ideas, so don't really quote me on it. But I believe that that may be what's happening there. So we may start seeing, considering if the Russian logistical situation remains the way it was about 2 days ago, that we may start seeing that the front line near Kyiv will be pushed back a little bit further, and it'll give the city even more breathing room. Also, you may notice from yesterday's map that this large pocket that I was claiming was Russian-controlled south of Kyiv is no longer here. And the reason why it's been removed is because I haven't gotten any information over the course of a week to suggest that there are any Russian forces still there or if there's any fighting ongoing there. So with a lack of information about any Russian troops even being in that area anymore, I am assuming now that this area has in fact been lost by the Russians and now the Ukrainians control this entire southern area south of Kyiv. So now, based off of yesterday's map, they're in a much better position to supply the city than they were days ago. Moving on from that to the south of the city, speaking of the pocket near Vasilkiv, we can see that some cruise missiles were flying over Vasilkiv today, as you can see right there, to a location we're not really sure of. So all we know at the moment, well, all I know at the moment, is that earlier in the morning, about maybe 18 hours ago at this point, there was a cruise missile flying towards a location further on in the country, but I don't know exactly where. Maybe, to try and connect some dots here, this cruise missile was what hit the objective in Zitomir that caught on fire. Maybe it was targeting fuel silos because the Russians have been using cruise missiles to try and target fuel reserves inside of Ukraine recently over the past 2 or 3 days. But that's entirely an opinion on my part, and that's really just trying to connect dots to figure out where that thing went and correlate it with something that happened over today's events. Anyways, moving on from that, out near the area of Urkovo, we've seen that a Russian helicopter has been shot down. We can see that Russian helicopter losses are really starting to mount in this war. I'll show you all the video. Just nothing more than the remains of the Russian helicopter in the field. So not much action, but it is showing that another Russian helicopter has been shot down. And I believe that that's starting to put the Russian helicopter losses into a really high number. I don't know the exact number, but I know the last time I checked it was around 18 or 20. And considering how many lost helicopters I've seen since that report, I would assume it's probably around the 30s by now. But I don't have any information to back that up, so that's my kind of like guesstimation of it. Anyways, moving on to the area of Chernihiv, we've only had one development today, which is a series of pictures of destroyed tanks near Chernihiv. These tanks were apparently destroyed today by the Azov forces around Chernihiv. Nonetheless, I'll just show them to you real quick. Now, something interesting I have seen is that the Azov Battalion is currently operating in 2 places. Apparently, it's operating around Chernihiv, and it's operating in Mariupol, because they are one of the main defenders of Mariupol right now. And so I don't really know if the Azov Battalion is just kind of a word to describe like a part of the military. You know, they're using battalion liberally, and they're just applying it to multiple units that are larger than a battalion across the entire country. I don't really know, but based off of what I'm seeing, it appears that the Azov Battalion, at least what they're calling the Azov Battalion, is in Chernihiv and Mariupol at the same time. And so before we move on to the location unknowns, which we have tons of today, and sadly, I keep on getting more and more of these as the days go on, it seems, because the locations of occurrences in the country aren't being reported as well as they used to be, and so I really just get a whole bunch of stuff that has unknown locations on it. So anyways, that being said, let's move on to the questions. Let's see. Oh wow, we've had a lot of them. Thank you all so much. And if y'all want to ask a question, feel free to chat up the chat. I mean, like, I would love to try and have as many questions to answer as possible. Moving on from that, um, please give generously to your local Red Cross. Very true. I highly agree with that. Pavel, we pray for you and your brother's safety and continued strength. I do too. Pavel has been here for a while. To anyone who's new, he is currently over near Kyiv fighting as a volunteer in the Ukrainian armed forces, and I wish him the best of luck. And I've been wishing him that every single day, and that's never going to change until the war is over and Ukraine actually gets a peace agreement. So I hope that he stays safe until then. Let's see, and here we go. Pavel, you will win. Pavel, how's the situation there? Tense situation, but we are maintaining. Okay, that's very good. We've actually got a report from the ground from Pavel, you know, who's there, and he says they're maintaining. I'm glad that Pavel doesn't actually give away the location of Ukrainian troops or anything, because that would be disadvantageous. He just kind of gives us a general kind of like synopsis of what he's seeing in his area of the front line, and apparently they are holding, which is very good news. And in the defensive war, holding is as good as winning. So moving on from that, Russia probably gets its best intelligence for Western news sources. I don't think so, because we don't. I don't report on Ukrainian positions. I just report on Russian losses, and I'm sure that the Russians have a very clear picture of the losses they're taking. So, in that regard, I don't really think that Western media is giving them any more extra information than what they already know. But you know, that's just me. Maybe some other channels out there are literally just giving away Ukrainian positions if the videos pop up. But I try not to do that because I do want Ukraine to win, and I'm not going to try and screw them over by showing a video that was posted like an hour ago, and it lets the Russians geolocate something. Anyways, this intro slash outro is Fire Slava Ukraini. Yes, it's an intro and outro that's very patriotic. I like it a lot. You know, I try and stay non-biased on my reporting on this channel, but I do have to say I support Ukraine over Russia. There's no question to that. And so I love the intro because it's just very patriotic and really stirring. I just like it a lot. Moving on from that, let's see. Good about all these Russian officers dying. I think I know what you're talking about. And we're going to get to that in the Kharkiv area. Spoiler alert: another major general in the Russian army got killed today. Southern ambassador from the Hunt for Red October voice. You've lost another Southern ambassador from the Hunt for Red October voice. What? Wait, you think I have that voice? Oh, come on now. No, I'm not movie quality. You've lost another major general? Yes, they have down near Kharkiv, but we're going to get to that in a minute. I don't want to talk about that too much right now because that's going to be saved for the victories at Kharkiv today. Your subscribers are notably increasing every day. They are. I don't really try and focus on that a lot because, you know, this is really about the news, and it's neat and all. I mean, like, I like to look at it and be like, oh, that's cool, but I really just want to get out good news. And if people are subscribing because they think it's good news and more people like my news, that's good. But, you know, it doesn't really matter in the end. Really, all I want to do is make sure that the quality of this channel's content gets better and better each day. Russia will fall when more info is leaked into Russia about the war. Yeah, it will. I mean, like, a lot of people are starting to talk about civil unrest in Russia, and it's true. I covered that yesterday, so if you want to go check out yesterday's stream after this one, or whenever you can, please feel free, because I actually talked in the first few minutes of the stream about the growing civil unrest in Russia, economic problems, and social issues. So make sure to go check that out if you want to hear more about that. Let's see. I hope the enforcer has been getting enough sleep. No, I'm very tired right now, but we're gonna hammer through this every day until the end of the war. I will not sleep until Ukraine wins. That's going to be my vow. There's a whole ton of people in Ukraine who are doing a lot more. They're laying down their lives for a country, and I have to support them in that, and I will never get an extra hour of sleep until Ukraine wins this war. I'm going to say that right now. Belarus Chief of Staff resigned. Wait a minute, hang on. Let me go pull up that. Belarus Chief of Staff resigns. Oh my lord. Hang on. Hang on, everyone. Let me just read this real quick. Oh my gosh, wow. Is that really true? Let me check it with a couple of other places. Uh, interesting. So it appears, I don't really have a lot of confirmation for this rather than these three articles because it appears. No, there's more of them. Yeah, apparently that's a legitimate thing. And when you have the chief of staff, which is higher up in most military's command chains, resigning, that says a lot about the support that this war has, even in Belarus, which isn't directly involved as far as we know, although they may be having support units in the rear. But who knows? But really, to be honest, that says a lot. Because think about this. We have a chief of staff in the United States. He's pretty high up there in the military chain. You know, he's getting on close to the president, kind of around the secretary of defense level. If you had the chief of staff resign due to a disagreement with what we were doing in a war, think about how much of an impact that has on public opinion. I mean, like, that's a huge impact because it shows that even the military leaders aren't even really into the idea of this war. And so, that being said, that's a huge deal. Let's see. Can you talk about what we know of the pro-Putin protests in Serbia? What's going on with that? Uh, I mean, like, I've seen so many memes about the Serbians and how much they love the Russians. But I don't really know anything about it because, I usually try and focus on frontline news and combat that's going on around Ukraine and maybe some social issues. But today I couldn't really find any, so this is really like a frontline focused report today, and so sadly I don't have any information about that. And I'm sorry that I don't. I wish I could answer that question for you. Um, Pavel, thank you, and you're most welcome to try to find your YouTube channel to subscribe, but could not find it. I think. Good stuff to hear. You're in good health, Pavel. I'm glad that everyone is always giving Pavel good wishes. It's always good to see everyone giving the volunteers good well wishes in the chat. I'm very happy for that. Y'all keep that up. I love it. What does the green area in the map mean? The green area in the map is the areas I'm assuming that the Russians will probably try and take over. And at least this is what I was thinking they'd want to do on the first day. So the green area around Kharkiv is the encirclement. And for a while that encirclement did happen, and then it was broken because it was a very weak encirclement by like a few breakthrough convoys, and apparently the Ukrainians just wiped them out, and Kharkiv was reopened. Most of the major roadways, at least, were reopened, and they weren't unsafe anymore. The area around this side of Kyiv used to be green, but I haven't filled it back in because I feel like the Russians have abandoned this side of the siege. I believe that they're just going to try and bombard the city and then just start driving straight through and just go with a much simpler, more tried and true tactic that the Russians try, which is just steamroll through something instead of trying to do something smart and encircle it and then slowly move in. So I've removed that green area, but mostly the green areas was what I believed they were wanting to achieve as their first day objectives. Although down here, I'm starting to have second guesses about this Dnipro front, where they push just straight from Donetsk down the major highway to Dnipro. Now I'm starting to think that since they're going to Zaporizhia first, and then we'll cover this little green line in a second because this is exactly what I was saying days ago. But I believe that they're going to go from Zaporizhia, if they can capture that, straight to Dnipro, and they're going to, if Zaporizhia is captured, is going to be captured on both sides of the river. They're going to shoot over to the other side of the river and try and encircle Dnipro on both sides using the H08 and the E105 roadways, most likely. So I believe that this little green area is going to change on tomorrow's map, and it's going to show it going from Zaporizhia to Dnipro instead of from Donetsk to Dnipro. But that's just a small thing. For the most part, the first day objectives were actually correct. I wish I still had the map up of what the first day looked like, but everywhere that's controlled by the Russians right now in red was actually green on day one. And, well, actually, I believe the first hours of the war, and it's all turned red for the most part as the week has gone on. So, according to me, they finally achieved most of their first day objectives, although some of them, like encircling Kyiv and Kharkiv, which were their major objectives, still have not been achieved. Anyways, moving on from that, that was a very good question, by the way. It might be Ukraine army blowing up oil tanks so the invaders can't use them. Yeah, but I mean, like, Zhytomyr is pretty far back right now from what we know. Because I haven't gotten any reports of the Russians moving past this little kind of like finger that they have into Ukraine towards Kyiv. And so I don't believe they'd be blowing up oil reserves that far back. I believe that'd be something you would do if the enemy is right up on them. Within like several miles, then you would probably start trying to blow it up. And on top of that, I believe that the Russians would probably have a more vested interest in destroying them, because you got to think the Ukrainians have to need supplies, and they're already outgunned by the Russians, at least on paper, although that's never stopped a country from winning before. And so they need a lot of supplies, and the Russians know this as well. And the Russians know that their supply situation is bad, so they're going to see if they can weaken the Ukrainian supply situation as well to kind of like even that playing field. And so I believe it would be more towards Russia's advantage to be destroying logistical resources like oil and, well, I call it gas oil, but, to destroy oil reserves than the Ukrainians would have. So that's just my opinion. But great question. Well, that actually really was a kind of great statement and question. I don't understand why Saudi/OPEC hasn't increased their oil production. Anyone has an answer? I can't really answer that right now because I haven't been following anything rather than what's exactly happening on the ground in Ukraine, because that's a lot to focus on each day, and it takes hours to put together this map. Like, it takes a long time. So I can't really focus on anything outside of the country, and I hate that I can't answer that question. But that's a really good question. People don't care about the Ukraine's cost of money and cost. It's close to home. I didn't see people saying it was bad when the exact same things were happening in the Middle East to multiple cities. Well, probably because in the Middle East we were kind of involved. Like we invaded Iraq, and then Syria, with ISIS and stuff, that kind of happened on its own. It was the Arab Spring, but we don't really have a vested interest. Like let me explain this, because a lot of people don't really understand that there's actually and I don't mean this in like a demeaning way when I say people don't understand. I'm just saying that, no one really thinks about it, but people don't really understand that there's a large sphere of influence up here, and it's a very powerful area of the world. I mean, like, Europe is undeniably one of the most strategically important areas in the world in terms of population and economics. The problem is that the U.S. doesn't have any allies in the Middle East, rather than the Saudis and the Israelis. They kind of keep like cordial relations with some of these countries, some of them they don't. But really, the Middle East isn't strategic because it doesn't have a lot of economic power. It doesn't have a lot of military power. There are no nuclear powers in the Middle East, except for Israel, because we think that Israel has like 50 nukes or so. So rather than that, I mean, like, there's not like anything going for anything to really matter in the Middle East. Like in Syria, when the Arab Spring happened and the civil war occurred, it's like, oh, that's unfortunate, but we could really care less, because it doesn't have to do with anything with our strategic situation that we currently possess. And our strategic situation is entirely in Europe. Most of the military bases that the U.S. has overseas are in Europe. We're a part of the NATO alliance, which is mostly European countries rather than the United States. And due to that reason, if something's happening down here is thousands of miles away from anything, we really have no vested interest in anything, so it doesn't really matter. And that's just the truth. I mean, like, that's not saying that these people aren't important. I mean, like, everyone's a living person, and so in that regard, everyone has equal worth. But when you look at it economically, their countries are much less important than other places like Asia and Europe. And then you come up here, and you see that there's a war happening, and it's just hundreds of miles away from the border of the first NATO country and the NATO alliance, and that starts to raise concerns. And on top of that, Europe is a place that has been stable for some 70 years for the most part, cutting out like the Czech rebellion in like 1968, well, the Czech uprising in 1968 and all that stuff. It's been mostly peaceful. No major wars have happened on the European continent for like 70 or 80 years, since World War II, pretty much. And every time anything happens in Europe, unlike some other parts of the world, like, the Middle East, Africa, Asia, things in Europe count, because a lot of people usually get killed. It's a lot of economic damage. And Europe being in a war throws the entire world into disarray for a good bit, except for the United States. The United States generally just somehow cruises through the war. It's generally okay. It's just what happens afterwards that isn't fun. But due to that reason, that's why Ukraine's a lot more important than the Middle East, and that's why a lot more people care about it, is because this could directly involve NATO. And considering that the Russians are a nuclear power and 3 of the NATO members that I know of, Britain, France, and the United States, are nuclear powers. It makes the situation much more tense and dire, if you see what I'm saying there. So I hope that answers the question, because a lot of people want to act like the Middle East is of equal worth to the United States, and rather than the oil, which we kind of secure through the Saudis for the most part, and the Russians mostly, like that's the crazy thing. We actually rely on most of our oil from Russia in terms of foreign imports of oil. We don't really care about the rest of it because it just has no strategic value to the United States for the most part, and that's why when we left Afghanistan, it doesn't even really matter. Now that you see, like a year later, no one even talks about it because Afghanistan was strategically pointless. You know, we went over there to do some other things with the country rather than trying to like secure a foothold in the Middle East and all, you know, blah blah blah. But anyways, you kind of get the point, I guess, at this point because I've been rambling for a while, and I'm sorry about that. We're gonna move on to this is fake from Russia. No snow around Kyiv. Are you sure? Because I remember looking at the weather radar last night, and a snowstorm was going to cover the entire country. But you know, you may be right. I mean, like honestly, I could actually see that being around Kharkiv because we do know that that it's been snowing and snow has been on the ground around Kharkiv for days. So that may be true, maybe. But you know, as far as I was told, that location was in Kyiv, and so for the moment that'll stay there. But if any information comes up that's hardcore that was in a different location, that marker will be removed and renamed to another location. Moving on from that. And none of those vehicle commanders have their heads outside the turret, which is why you keep getting smoked. Situational awareness. If you're talking about the tank commanders, yes, probably. We're paying $5.45 a gallon in California. Yeah, I mean, like the oil sanctions are going to start having a large effect on the cost of gas. Honestly, I hardly drive a car due to the cost of gas, so I don't really know because I haven't been out in like I haven't been driving my own car in months. Usually I'm like in someone else's car going somewhere. I try and live economically as much as possible. So I don't really know the current cost of gas in my area, but I believe it's up around $4.30. Um, we care about Ukraine because they're a peace-loving people. Well, I mean, like everyone loves peace, you know. Like the Middle East likes peace as well. It's just that due to there being no strategic interest in securing stability in the Middle East, stability just doesn't occur. You know, it's kind of like how in Europe, before World War One, there was really no need to try and keep political stability in Europe. I mean, you know, there was the Congress of Vienna in 1815 that laid out the balance of power in Europe, but Germany and France could get in a war in like 1870 and just duke it out. And then the British could make a coalition against the Russians in the 1850s and just duke it out. And no one really cared and it didn't really matter. But nowadays it matters a lot in Europe because breaking that stability could lead to deadly onslaughts that the world's never even seen before. It wouldn't even compare to World War II. So moving on from that, we're going to look at that is not a large amount of snow. That's very true, but the snow, all while it's a small amount of snow, when snow melts, it creates slush, and when slush is created, it creates the Rasputitsa, and that's the worst thing that a Russian tank can endure. And we already know up around Chernihiv, the Rasputitsa already exists. So if anything, it's not really going to lead to the Rasputitsa. It's just going to make sure that the Rasputitsa hangs around for longer, and that will improve the Ukrainian defenders' positions in terms of what the Russians are capable of due to the weather. Because I've been thinking this, but I haven't really been saying it a lot. Logistics are incredibly important, but weather plays another important factor in how wars go. And right now, the weather's not in favor of the Russians. Winter War 2022. I've been saying that so much, man. I'm glad you agree with me. You said that word for what I've been saying. So thank you so much. The weather is similar to upstate New York, but a tad warmer. Yeah, I think so. I'm not really sure what climate area this is in, but if we look at the entire world, I mean, yeah, I could see that. I mean, like, I could see that. But it still snows, you know? I mean, like, I've never actually been in an area that snows a lot. I live in the southeast US, so, you know, I don't get a lot of snow. But I know that New York gets a pretty decent amount of snow, I think, in the winter, from what I've been told. Let's see. Untrue. It's just that the enforcer wants to give a good idea to Ukrainians of what's happening in their country. Yes. I try and give as like clear a picture of what's happening in Ukraine, as much as possible. And I try and make some assumptions here and there so that way I can try and get the best information out as possible. Although it's still opinion and it's not entirely true and it may be proven wrong, I'm just trying to give like as good a picture as possible. Same thing we have going on here in Midwest USA, slop for ground content. Yes, that's very true. Another Russian general killed. That is true, and we'll get to that in a second. I know everyone keeps on talking about it, and it did happen, but we've got to wait because it's right there in Kharkiv, and I love to go from point to point so I don't miss anything. So we will get there, I promise you. This analysis is lights out. This channel should be at 1 million subs. I thank y'all all so much for the support. It's very nice to know that I'm appreciated for delivering the news I deliver. I try and deliver the best possible, and I'm glad that people appreciate the quality. And I used to say this when I had no viewers, and I haven't said it in a while, but I am absolutely honored that out of all the people y'all could be watching right now, y'all have come to my channel and y'all are watching me. Y'all could be doing a million other things right now, and all those millions of other things don't include watching my channel. And the fact that y'all are coming here and listening to my version of the news instead of anyone else's is just a huge honor to me. I can't even understand why y'all are watching me instead of someone else, but I'm more than appreciative that y'all are doing it. And I'm just very, like, I cannot say it. It's not like the samurai way or anything. It's just literally I am truly honored that all of y'all are here watching this news, and I'm just so thankful for it. So thank you all so much. Let's see. A warship was hit by Ukraine from Odessa. Oh boy, everyone's touching on the news I'm about to cover. Yes, I do have that. It's right there. And we will get to that when we get to the southern front. So I'm going to answer a few more questions because it seems like everyone's chomping at the bits to get to the news, and I kind of am too now because y'all are hitting on everything I was going to cover today. So we will start moving on here after a few more questions. People did protest over anything going on in the Middle East. You bring up past actions in order to justify Russian aggression is crass. Oh, that's a chat and conversation in the chat. I'm sorry. I saw a video on another channel earlier that would support that theory but cannot vouch for its veracity. If you're talking to me, I don't really know what that one's specifically about, that specific comment. But yeah, maybe. I mean, like, if you could join the Discord and send that video over one of the chats in the Discord, I would be highly appreciative because I would like to watch it. I try and watch stuff that other channels make, but at the same time, I kind of want to make my own independent conclusions because they've been usually right. Or, you know, at least have my own independent take on things. Because if I watch other people's channels too much, then I might just start mirroring exactly what they're saying. And, you know, and I don't want to do that because then that's unoriginal. So, where are the Z markings on the vehicles? They're usually on the sides. Sometimes they paint them on the front now. And sometimes they just paint multiple Z's all over the tank on every side. Like, there'll be like 3 Z's per side. So, I mean, like, really, they could be anywhere, but usually they're on the sides. Some sources say an attack on Kyiv in 24 to 96 hours. That would be interesting to see if that's true. Not an interesting thing to see as in I would like to just watch people duke it out, but it'll be interesting to see if an offensive does begin again on Kyiv. Because as far as I know, they've actually been pushed back to about the Horenka area, but I haven't moved the front line because I just haven't gotten enough information to confirm that yet. So that being said, I'm going to move on now to the locations unknown, and then we're going to get to this little convoy down here that was destroyed, and it'll touch on something I said days ago. So if some of y'all have been around since days ago, y'all are about to see what I'm saying come true. And if you weren't, make sure to go watch the other streams, because if you like this one, you will like the other ones probably, because they're the same thing. They're the exact same thing. So anyways, moving on to the location unknown. We see pictures of Russian convoy being hit by artillery today. The pictures are actually well taken. It looks almost like it's a movie scene going on down there with how the explosions look, such as this one. But nonetheless, I'll just show you the pictures. You can see that a barrage is hitting this convoy. They're kind of spread out. Don't really see any people at them. But nonetheless, I'm sure there were people there and they were running or they were hit. But nonetheless, it looks like the convoy took some damage. I don't really know the condition of these vehicles. They look generally intact, but usually shrapnel can fly into the engine blocks and damage them to the point that the vehicles are inoperable. But we do know that this was a supply convoy of some sort pulled over somewhere to take a break. Maybe rest the crews that are driving them for a while. And now it looks like they may not be going anywhere. So that being said, we're going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, which is that we've seen more captured vehicles today. These pictures were taken today, as far as I know. You can see that this is some kind of captured T-80. We can also see a kind of like Grad missile launch. I'm not really sure what this thing is. Oh, this is an Uragan. I've never heard of this thing before. I'm going to be honest with you all. I'm kind of ignorant about what this thing actually is, but we do know that it's an MLRS, and that's all we need to know. It's rocket artillery. Moving on from that, we can see a burning vehicle in the distance. And finally, we can see the same MLRS from a different angle, it appears. And yeah, you know, that's pretty much it. It's just more captured Russian vehicles. It's kind of like run-of-the-mill stuff at this point. I mean, the Ukrainians are capturing more stuff than they're destroying, and they're destroying a lot of stuff. So far, I checked last night. Well, actually, just an hour ago. I'm sorry, correction. About an hour ago. And they had said that the Ukrainians had destroyed about 280 Russian tanks. That, I believe, may be a dated figure at this point. But 280 tanks is a very admirable number, considering that would be about a third of their tank forces in total. You know, if the Ukrainians were to lose 300 tanks, that would be like 1 out of every 3 of their tanks have been destroyed. And they've already destroyed that many Russian tanks, according to the reports. And if that's true, that's impressive. It shows that the Russians are taking a lot of losses. And if we're to assume, now let's just pull this up. I know I do a lot of math now, but I actually do want to know figures. T90A cost. Like, how much does a T90 cost new? So a T90A costs 4 units, okay, 4.25 million in 2011. Wait, 4.5 million in 2016. Let's use that number. Let's say that all of them are T90As, and they're all $4.5 million a pop. So $4.5 million per tank times 280. So the Russians have lost $1.26 billion worth of T90s, if all those tanks are T90s. Now, the cost varies from tank to tank. A T-72B3 is not the same cost as a T90, nor a T-80, but you're getting the picture that the material losses that the Russians have suffered in main battle tanks alone is actually very substantial, and it's going to be very hard to recover those kinds of losses after the war. Moving on from that, we can see more Russian vehicles destroyed. Once again, more run-of-the-mill stuff from the Ukrainians. We've gotten so used to seeing the successes of the Ukrainian armed forces, it's not even impressive at this. Oh, I'm sorry, there's copyright music in that. That could cause issues. But you can see a video of them being destroyed. You'll see a large flare of an explosion right there. And pretty much a vehicle was destroyed. Apparently, we got an actual name out of the unit that took the video. Usually, I wouldn't really support that, but considering it's drone footage, we don't really know where that unit is. So, that being said, we're going to move on. We've seen that another Russian plane has been shot down today. I could not get the location on this. Oh, I'm sorry, correction. This is actually the plane that was shot down in Kharkiv, and these are the remains of the aircraft. If you want to see those videos, make sure to go to the Discord and find yesterday's map. And it'll be the markers that are colored in yesterday's color. I believe it was yellow or red. No, it was red. And you can see the videos of that aircraft being shot down over Kharkiv yesterday. But that's the remains of the aircraft today. And so now we're going to move on to the next bit of location unknown. And that is more destroyed Russian equipment. I mean, it's unbelievable at this point. It's almost an endless stream of destroyed Russian equipment. I believe we've actually already gone over those pictures. But if not, I'll show them again. Yes, I believe we have, actually. These look like the same BMP-3s from earlier. Yeah, it is, actually, the Azov Battalion. I thought, when I put that up earlier, that that was actually a whole different group. But that's actually the same one, so my apologies. I'm actually going to delete that one. So moving on from that, we can see another Russian destroyed convoy. This one's a video. I'll show it to y'all real quick.
Соляра тече.
Sadly, right at the beginning of this video, there was a clip of a road sign, but there wasn't enough of it for me to read the town name that was right off that road, because it was showing an arrow showing that it was just, like, the next exit, but I couldn't read it to figure out where this was. But anyways, it's a destroyed Russian supply convoy. Once again, that's great news. They're already in a bind. If y'all want to know about that, there's also a small essay I wrote on the Russian logistical issue in the Discord. You can find that under the useful links section as well if you scroll back through it a bit. But the Russian logistical situation is poor, and they don't have enough supply trucks to supply the army to keep it moving. And while having tanks and all is a great thing, having supplies to actually run them is much more important than actually having the tanks. And so they don't have enough trucks already, and every day we see more and more of these trucks being destroyed or abandoned. So their logistical situation is getting worse and worse. At the moment, we do know that the Russians are pulling in freight trains worth of civilian vehicles to try and supplement these losses, but just looking at the civilian vehicles and their carrying capacity, it's probably not going to fix the issue, but it may stymie the hemorrhaging of their supply vehicle losses. Anyways, moving on from that, we can see that we can actually see a video inside of the Ukrainian AA vehicle that shot down an Su-30 yesterday. I'll show you all that. It looks a lot like something out of the 80s. But nonetheless, here's the video.
Пост, они здесь! Сход! Сход, захват! Захват! Узкий луч! Зближення! Цель знищена! Азимут! Знищена! 300, на дальності 5. Прийом! Азимут 255, знищена! Цель літак! Цель падає! Плюс! Плюс! Все, вправо!
Sadly, we can't see the screen to actually know what they were seeing, but we do know that they shot down the plane. And that was really cool to actually see inside the AA vehicle that shot them down and see what was happening in there, like what the reaction was and stuff, because we haven't seen that before, and so that's really new footage. It's very original in terms of everything else we've seen. And finally, we can see that even more Russian logistical vehicles were destroyed today. Here's the video of it. Oh, it's the same video. Why? It's weird. Did I already cover that? I don't know. So that's everything in the location unknown area. And finally, we'll move on down to here. And look at this, y'all. Now, the whole entire reason I wrote up the essay on the Russian logistics days ago was because I was talking about how much fuel and how many trucks they would need to probably fuel all of the units in Ukraine right now. And that led me onto a rabbit hole where I discussed like all the Russian logistics, ammo, food, and all that stuff, and calculated it up and wrote it up into an essay showing that they just don't have the means to supply their current invasion force, much less anything additional. So today we've seen a video of nothing but destroyed Russian fuel trucks. And if we count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If everyone's been watching since days ago, y'all remember I said it took exactly 8 vehicles, 8 fuel trucks to supply a Russian BTG with fuel, the whole thing filling them up from empty. And there are exactly 8 vehicles, 8 fuel trucks in this convoy. Okay, I just have to say this. I don't know how, because I actually could not find the numbers that these fuel trucks can carry in liters. I had to guesstimate based off of the size of an American fuel truck's tank, which is about twice the size. I had to guesstimate how big these things were. But there's exactly 8 vehicles, 8 fuel trucks in this convoy, and that tells me that I apparently got that number dead on, that each of these fuel trucks is carrying around 6,000 liters of gas each. And I think that's nuts. Like, that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, there's no way I got that number right. And right here in this one convoy, there are exactly 8 vehicles. Now, that may just be correlation, but it doesn't mean causation. It may actually require more fuel vehicles to fuel up a BTG or less. But based off of what I see right here, that's the exact number I was saying was needed to fuel up a BTG. Which was nuts. I couldn't believe that the correlation in between the numbers was that exact. Moving on from that, though, because we can see that that was around the area that I said was a breakthrough convoy. So I don't know if that suggests that there has been more than a breakthrough convoy now. There's been an actual advance, but due to a lack of information, this maroon line will still suggest that this was a breakthrough convoy that was moving towards Kyiv. So moving on from that, we're going to move on to the area of Sumy, where we've had 2 developments today. We've seen more destroyed Logi trucks, and seeing destroyed Logi trucks, I cannot say this enough, is more important than seeing destroyed tanks, because this is a lack of food, gas, water, and everything else the soldiers at the front need to keep on moving. And so if this stuff is lost, it's much more important than losing a tank, because while they lose a tank, that only eases the supply issues they have, because they no longer have to provide gas, ammo, and a whole bunch of other stuff for the tank to run. But destroying Logi trucks is the other way around. So anyways, I'll just show you this video.
Ну що, як вам гостеприємність щирих українців, бля?
Не так, не так. Welcome to Ukraine, сука!
But pretty neat. It's really cool that they keep on destroying Logi trucks just about everywhere now. Through the actual military and also through civilian efforts, as we've seen a few videos of civilians attacking the Russian logistical trucks themselves. And finally, we've seen a very large amount of Russian POWs captured in the area of Sumy. It looks like it's a platoon-sized unit, maybe more, but it's a rather large group of prisoners, and they're all dressed really poor. I don't know if that's clothes they were given afterwards or they scavenged from houses that they looted. I don't really know, but they're all dressed really poor. But nonetheless, those are Russian prisoners of war. So moving on from that, we're going to start moving down towards Kharkiv. And before I do that, since this was a lot of information that we covered over this location unknown area in the Sumy area, I'm going to answer some more questions if possible. Let's see. We're going to scroll down a bit so that way we can catch up with the chat. Oh yeah, also make sure to ask as many questions as y'all like, everyone. Make sure to ask, I'll try and answer. Hopefully I can get around to it. Those are not modern Russian fuel vehicles. They modernized to the Euro 4320, which is what gets me. Are they tossing out old equipment and using conscripts as cannon fodder? Well, you do have to remember that it's not an economically viable strategy to throw away equipment, whether it's old or not. And it's not a viable strategy to throw like poorly trained soldiers at something and get them all killed, because 1, that loses a lot of money, 2, it pisses off a lot of people in your home country, because you know, getting their sons killed when they had no clue what they're doing is not going to go over well, and most people will know that because their son's only been in the army for 3 months and then he gets killed. They'll be like, oh, you sent them to the front line to get killed, and they're not going to be far from the truth. So, you know, usually in an invasion, they try and have a lot of experienced troops and then a small number of inexperienced troops mixed into those experienced troops. So that way they can get some experience, but the advance will be carried by the more experienced troops, and they'll take care of business and get things done quickly and cheaply. Because getting things done quicker is getting them done cheaper. And in a war, in every situation, you always want to get things done as cheap as possible. I know that's a terrible thing, because usually people say lives are more important than money, but in the actual sense of operating a war or a government, money is always just about more important than lives. So that being said, you know, it's a terrible truth, but it's a truth nonetheless. Also, another thing is that, yes, they have modernized to the Euro 4320, but they also purportedly modernized to the Su-57 for the Russian Air Force, you know, the stealth plane, and the T-14 Armata, which is the really sci-fi, you know, modern super tank. But the thing is that they haven't really gotten a lot of either of those, and so I don't really think they have a lot of Euro 4320s, and they're probably still relying on the older vehicles in most units. That being said, hope I answered that question a good deal for you. I don't think U.S. is a net exporter of oil anymore. They were under Trump. I don't think they... Well, actually they are. If we pull that number up, how much oil does the U.S. export? I believe they actually export a pretty good bit. Let's see. In 2003, oil exports were worth 0.16 of the value of oil imports. In other words, a pittance. In 2021, that percentage was 52.1%, 52.12%, the third consecutive year above 50%. So we're exporting about half the oil that we import. So let's see what this one says down here. Oil, petroleum, supply. This is from EIA.gov, so this is actually a government website saying this. The United States exported more crude oil and petroleum products than it imported during the first half of 2021 by 120,000 barrels per day, which is actually a pretty big amount. That's actually the amount of barrels per oil we import from Iraq, because I looked at that number for fun the other day. We import about that much from Iraq a day. And so that's how much more oil and petroleum we're exporting per day than we're importing, which is really interesting to me. And you have to remember that most of the time, we're not really importing oil to make up for a lack of our own. A good amount of the time, we're importing and exporting oil so that way we'll have economic ties to other countries and we can sway their decision making through our buying power. You know, because if a country doesn't really have any attachment to the other one, like let's say we like imported no oil whatsoever, like no oil from anybody, and we produced all of our own oil and we didn't have to trade for anybody with anything. And so, you know, we tell Iraq, you know, Iraq do this, they're going to go, no. And then, like, what do? You know, like, we could invade them, but then we don't have any other options. I mean, like, we just have the most extreme option, which is invading that country and then taking them over and installing some kind of puppet government that will do what we want. And that's all we have, is the most extreme option. But you can control that situation if you import oil from them, you know, like several $billion, and then you sell some back to them, you know, that you produce in your own country, or you sell that to other countries so that way they'll have a dependence on your energy. And so that way, the countries that are dependent on your oil, you can tell them what to do, and they'll generally be scared of losing their oil trade, and then they'll do what you want, I mean. And then the countries that you're buying oil from, that you don't really need it from, but you're just buying it from, they're going to be scared of losing that income. And so then they'll be much more lenient to doing what you want, if you see what I'm saying. So trade isn't always about making up for a lack of things. It's really about trying to get some kind of control monetarily and economically over another country. So, you know, I mean, like, that's really interesting. I kind of learned that in the finance classes in college, like in my sophomore year. And I was like, really? I was like, I did not know that that was what trade was for in some regards. But sometimes it is actually to make up for a lack of resources, you know, but sometimes the other case is just to have economic control over another country. Any comment on Ukrainians in Kyiv starving? I haven't heard much about... Oh, wait a minute. No, I remember you. I'm sorry. You've got to go. You're pro-Russian. Let me remove that. Sorry, I haven't actually heard about that, and also that guy's a pro-Russian, just for everyone to know. Please quit calling it a convoy and start calling it what it is, a target. Hey, you had me in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. I actually thought you were going another direction with that, but yeah, I should start calling them targets. I think I'll start doing that. Ditch the tanks, no more logistics problems, easy win. Look at Gustavo. I mean, he's got this already figured out. Someone needs to promote him to the general staff of the Russian army. I heard a retired U.S. general saying it's a pity the U.S. is not involved, as watching the Russians in action, the U.S. could wipe out the Russian forces in Ukraine in under 24 hours. You know, I believe that's something that Americans in general, and I'm not saying this in a demeaning way, okay? This is kind of just like in a sitting back and looking at it way. I believe that the Americans have gotten spoiled with... Well, all of Americans, including me, have kind of gotten spoiled with the way the American military operates, because due to its budget, our soldiers are so much better trained, and we've hashed out our strategies and our tactics so much more compared to other countries, even with the shortcomings we have, you know, like remember Pat Tillman got shot in Iraq and all that stuff, but beyond that stuff, you know, because that's small things, we're so much better trained than other armies, and when you actually see them in action, and when we actually match up against them and actually fight them, you just see that they fall apart because they actually have no training compared to the Americans. And it's just due to budgeting and all that stuff. And, you know, we can go and have our tankers practice shooting 50 rounds a year, and the average tanker in Russia shoots like 15. And so, as far as target practice goes, the American tankers are much more experienced in loading the guns. You don't have to do that in Russia, though. They have auto loaders, which means that there's no person like manually loading the cannons inside of a tank. But in America, they well train on that stuff to the point that it's muscle memory, while in other countries they don't train enough, and then they're trying to figure it out in the middle of combat, if you see what I'm saying. So I believe we're actually spoiled by our massive military budget, and we think that other countries will perform as well as the United States, who has almost unlimited funding for the military in almost every regard: research, development, training, pay, and so and so. But really, the pay's not that great. But we're not getting into that. That's going down a rabbit hole. Moving on from that, let's see. No one will ever trust Russia again. They will always be a poor country. And they'll also be a stupid country because no one will ever believe that their military might's actually that great anymore if Ukraine actually does win. Now, I believe that Ukraine will win because I want them to win. But honestly, this could really go either way. Because if the Russians are able to sort out this logistical issue, then on paper they should win. But the thing is that historically, the Russians never sort out the logistical issues, and then they just have to give up. That's what happened in Afghanistan and Finland, and I believe that's what's going to happen here, because we've seen that they started off with poor logistics, and usually it improves a little, but it doesn't improve enough. And considering they're having to bring in civilian vehicles already to make up for the shortcomings of vehicles that they started off with, that doesn't say much for how they will do. Because trying to sort out problems trying to sort out problems immediately after you just started and the problems are present tells you that they're not doing well. So, moving on to the next question. U.S. has exported more oil than it imports since 2010. Thank you for giving me that info. That's good. That's good to know. Saw an interview with a reporter having a dinner sat next to Putin. Didn't drink anything. That's a smart guy. Because Putin probably had everything in that room poisoned. I'm just playing. He probably didn't because, that wouldn't look good to have a reporter in an interview get poisoned. But who knows? The guy's kind of crazy. I know the people in Kyiv, they have enough food for now, they told me. Yeah, and I mean, the honest truth is that if you're going to act like people starving in a siege is unheard of, that's what sieges are made for. They're made to starve people out. And so acting like, oh, look at the Ukrainians, they're letting their people starve. It's like, dude, that's a siege, I mean, that's what happened in Stalingrad. That's what happened in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg in World War II, is that people were eating, wall paste and stuff because there was no food. And so it's, ridiculous to act like it's Ukraine's fault that they're in a siege, and then their city starts starving. This is what are they supposed to do? Just make food appear? Or what, what's the solution to that issue? Rather than just giving up and surrendering. And so that's why I got rid of the pro-Russian, pretty much in short, because it wouldn't make much sense. More British soldiers were killed by U.S. troops in Iraq than Iraqis, but you know where the fire buttons are. Well, I mean, the British, I'm not trying to, negate the amount of British troops in there, but, the Americans had, 500,000 soldiers in the invasion. I believe let's just pull up the invasion numbers. Invasion of Iraq. Let's see how many British forces were in there. Strength. Okay, so the U.S. had 477,000 personnel involved in the invasion of Iraq. That's actually twice the number that Russia's using to try and invade Ukraine, which is really interesting to me. And the British only had 45,000 troops. Okay, so if you look at that, that's almost like a 10... That's like... Let me make sure that figure's right, though. Let me do the math on that. 1 second, everyone. Just stand by. I'm going to do the math on that real quick. 477,000. So they only had around 9.5% of the forces in Iraq that the United States had. And now we're going to pull up how many troops did the U.S. kill in friendly fire in Iraq. Let's get those figures. How many troops did how many UK troops did the US kill in friendly fire? Okay, so we killed 9 of them. Okay, so let me just say this. Friendly fire is kind of a thing that happens in wars, and if we only killed 9 British troops, and that's more than the British lost in combat, that's not bad. That's kind of just that's an unfortunate occurrence, but if they only lost 8 people in combat, or 2, and then we killed 9 of them on accident, that's not really the worst thing in the world. It wasn't like we were mowing down hundreds of British soldiers. So, I mean, although it's still an unfortunate thing that friendly fire happened and they got killed, it's not really like it's that big of a deal, although that sounds kind of aloof. But that's just the truth. So long as Ukraine does not run out of fuel and ammunition, they stand a good chance of repelling the Russian invasion. I don't know about their fuel situation, I mean, yeah, the ammo's coming in from all around the world all the time, but no one's addressing really where they're getting their fuel, because they got most of it, 90% of it, I believe, from Russia before the war, and I'm sure, obviously, they've been cut off from that. And so where are they going to get the fuel now? And so the only thing I could say is that they've got to get it from the west. And what does that mean? Because if Odessa gets captured, that's going to cut off their oil, because then there won't be any ship access to the entirety of Ukraine to deliver oil to them. And then you'll have to bring it in by pipeline, if there even is one, into Ukraine from the west, or you'll have to bring it in by truck. And I just don't really know if that would be a viable solution for the Ukrainians in terms of their oil situation, because we know a lot of their fuel reserves have been destroyed. We don't know what percentage, but we've seen a lot of videos of it. And so I don't really know if that situation is critical and if they're trying to fix it or what. So that being said, I hope that they can find a way to fix the fuel issue if there is one. Let's see. Ukraine will not win. The more Ukrainians drag it out, the more the country gets destroyed. That's becoming a very common sentiment, but would you rather live under the boot of a foreign country, or would you rather fight it out, hopefully win, and then get your country destroyed in the process? Because honestly, if you had a choice in between freedom or security, if you remember Benjamin Franklin's statement, if you give up freedom for security, you deserve neither. If they surrender, they're giving up their freedom for security, and then I'm sure they would get neither of those. I'm sure the country would be in a very destable position. The puppet government that would be installed would be in a terrible state, and the whole entire country would be in disarray and chaos for a good while. And so I don't really believe that would be a good solution. Really, they just have to fight on at this point. There's really no other way for them to do things. They either have to fight until there isn't a Ukraine left to fight for, or they have to win. It's just one or the other at this point. There's really no option for them left. And they won't have a smart-ass president to start stuff. Let's see. What will Putin do if his entire army fails in Ukraine? I don't really know, because every other military operation they've undertaken, like in Chechnya, he won that one. It took him like 9 years, but he won it, and it was really just against terrorists, but nonetheless. He went into Georgia and he won. And then he went into Crimea in 2014. And in a way, he didn't really directly fight the Ukrainians, but he won. And so he hasn't really lost. And we don't really know what would happen to him if he lost the war. So if he does, I mean, like, you know, it's really up in the air to me what would happen. Anything could happen. But we just have to wait and see, I guess, at least on my part. Because I don't really want to go either way. Because, you know, either he'll be ousted, he'll be exiled, or nothing will happen. It's one or the other. I looked up loser in the dictionary and saw Putin's picture. I like that. That's pretty good. Yeah, they should have learned from Afghanistan. Urban warfare is expensive, long, and a pain in the ass. I do have to agree. Bust out more vids. Okay, I think you're talking about showing more vids. I will. Did they kill another general? You know what? That being said, we're going to end the questioning. I'm going to get to that for y'all, okay? Because everyone's saying that, and I have to agree. That's really big news. Right here. Major General killed. Major General Vitaly Gerasimov was killed today near Kharkiv. Now, that's the news link, and if you want to click on that, join the Discord, go to the useful links section. The map should be the only newest thing that's up in the useful links section of my Discord server, and y'all can go click on the link and read more about it. But yes, Major General Vitaly Gerasimov was killed today near Kharkiv. I believe that's the second or third general they've lost in this war, and generals are very difficult to replace, at least in the competent level that those generals were at, if you can even call them competent at this point. So, that being said, that's another severe loss to Russia. I'm sure they'll come out and confirm that within the next few hours if they haven't already confirmed it. And that will be the third general killed. And they'll still be saying, that's okay, everyone. The situation on the ground is fine. We've only lost 500 guys, and somehow 3 of them have been generals. So that'll be really weird for them to come out and try and say. The U.S. also has tank simulators. That's true. I don't know if the Russians have those, though. They may have them. Heard about Australia being involved now. No, I haven't. I'll have to look into that a little bit more tomorrow. Any thought on buying rubles? In 100 years, when the Russian economy recovers, your grandkids could be rich. That's pretty good. Build Ukraine back better. That's kind of like an American political thing, so I'm going to pass on that. What makes you think Ukraine is free? Well, when you compare it to Russia, they're just freer. I mean, like, you know, without, like, getting in there and splitting hairs, they're freer than Russia because they actually have elections where different people are elected, if you see what I'm saying. I mean, like, Zelensky came from nothing to he founded a party called Servant of the People that was based off of his TV show. The party became incredibly popular, and then he won the election by a 77% majority. Unlike Russia, that's only had 3 leaders, and 2 of them are really the same people, Medvedev and Putin. They just kind of switch places so that way they can get around the term limit rule in Russia. They don't really have elections over there. Putin's been in charge forever, and then, Zelensky says he's only going to be there for 1 term, and he's still in his first term. And there was a president before him, and a president before that, and a president before that, and they were all different people who didn't really rule Ukraine. Well, not really rule Ukraine, but they were the president of Ukraine for a long time. And that alone would tell you that the Ukrainians actually have a lot more freedom than the Russians, because they're actually able to vote for people in elections, if you see what I'm saying. So to me, that's the big difference. That would be like the defining thing, the basic thing, without getting into hair splitting, that would say that they actually do have more freedoms than the Russians. Moving on from that, massive aerial bombing, that's what he did in Chechnya. Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's probably something he would probably do. Ukraine stealing the fuel from pipelines, Russia feeding them free oil. I don't know if that's like an affirmative statement that that's happening, but if it is, that would be hilarious. During the May Day parades in the Soviet era, people were impressed with the huge numbers of the artillery being shown. It was later discovered that the weapons were just being paraded in big circles. I don't know if that's true. I'll have to look into that, because if that is true, that's insane. But I wouldn't really know why they would do that, because, like the Russians back in the day during Soviet times, they literally had tens of thousands of everything, and they also somehow found the way to maintain it all. So, I don't know. I have to look into that. Anyways, moving on into the rest of Kharkiv. We haven't gotten a lot of news out of Kharkiv today either, but we did see the aftermath of the Su-34 that was shot down. It's the exact same video that was location unknown, and I actually corrected that. I found that it said Kharkiv later, and that seemed to back up what they said last night, that the Su-34 was what had been shot down, so that video was now placed there. Moving on from that, we can see more damage in Kharkiv to civilian buildings. I'll just show you all that. It's very self-explanatory and rather unfortunate. Sadly, I don't believe this sort of stuff will be slowing down anytime soon, because it appears that the Russians are starting to rely more on bombarding these cities than actually trying to take them over, and so I believe that this will only get worse as the war goes on. Moving on from that, also another thing is that a lot of people are saying, well, if Ukraine does win, their nation is destroyed. Yes, but you do have to remember that they have overwhelming support from the West. And so every single country, although we can't find money for social programs in our own countries most of the time around the world, they will come up with the money to send to Ukraine to start rebuilding this thing from the ground up in a very modern looking way. And really honestly, if Ukraine won this war, and what I'm saying is going to happen with countries just funneling money into Ukraine to rebuild it, we could probably see Ukraine turning into a very advanced looking Eastern European country, a lot like Poland is in some places. If that happens in the future, although it was really bad right now for the Ukrainians, the future can actually be pretty bright, and the Ukrainians could see economic growth that they've maybe never seen before. Anyways, we've got some really interesting footage today from inside of a Russian BTR of it in action. I'm not going to say anything. This video is kind of self-explanatory, and I'm just going to let y'all watch.
Огонь! Огонь!
So nonetheless, it looks like they may have been ambushed, because the vehicle in front of them looks like it's been hit and it's burning, and it's also facing in the direction they're going. And the fires are still kind of fresh on it, although it does look like the vehicle's burned down a pretty good bit. So I'm guessing that they were maybe ambushed, but I don't really have any information to back that up, so that's all kind of like assumptions on my side. So anyways, moving on from that, we're going to move on down to the southern front, cover half of it. and then I'll maybe answer some more questions, cover what happened in Mykolaiv. A lot happened in Mykolaiv today. The ship sinking, Odessa, and then I'll just answer a whole bunch of questions. So anyways, in the area of Izium, we can see that the police station was destroyed today. I don't believe there's any fighting in Izium. I believe all this damage is happening from bombardments. But nonetheless, here's the video. You know, it's crazy to me that at this point it looks like the Russians are just bombarding everything and they're not even holding back. But that being said, that's really all I can say, because a decent amount happened in Izium. I believe there was a 3 people killed there yesterday. Let's see. No, green is day 8. I'm sorry. On day 8, 3 people were killed in another bombardment of the city by artillery. And so, you know, I mean, like, they've just been getting pounded. So it's not really that shocking, but you know, it's still crazy that the Russians just bombard civilians and civilian areas without regard. Moving on from that, we can see that the Ukrainians are attacking the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republic's fuel supplies, because a depot was hit in Luhansk today, and it appears to be on fire and perhaps destroyed. So rather than it burning, we can see that maybe the fuel supplies of Donetsk and Luhansk will be impeded for a short while. Maybe some units will be affected for a bit, but honestly, I don't really feel like that's going to be too big of a setback to the Russian side, because the Russians, you know, have an unlimited amount of oil, and considering that they have a lot of sanctions against their oil now from most countries, I'm sure they have a whole surplus that they're not selling anymore that they'll just start funneling towards their direction. So moving on from that, we've got one thing that happened in Mariupol today, which was a report from a soldier in the Azov Battalion. Now, I would like to say that I don't really know how much he's saying is true, because, of course, you know, both sides, although I do side with the Ukrainians, both sides could be trying to kind of, like, paint a picture, if you see what I'm saying. But nonetheless, I'm going to let y'all see it and hear the report for yourselves.
My name is Denis Prokopenko. I'm a commander of the Azov Regiment. The defense of Mariupol has already been going for 12 days. We Azov Regiment protectors of Mariupol are successfully fortifying our combat task on the front line. The enemy has not entered the city. Being surrounded since March the 1st by the increasing amount of the enemy troops, our soldiers holding on the defense of an important strategical place, the forepost of the Sea of Azov. The strength of our fighters has been already admired by the whole world. Dedication of the warriors has been highly evaluated by Ukrainians as well as people outside the country. But the enemy is breaking the rules of the war by shelling the civilian people and destroying the infrastructure of the city. The enemy is subjecting Mariupol people for another genocide. There is a critical lack of water and food, no electricity and gas during the cold season already for several days. Western countries always declare the democratic values, among which one of the most important is the life of human and being and the honor of man. But the innocent people in Mariupol city are almost starving, and this is happening now. It is happening in modern Europe. The attempts to organize a safe corridor for evacuation of the civilian people was failed because of several actions of the enemy. The assembly area, which local authorities has identified the places of start the evacuation were shelled actively. If a no-fly zone over the Ukraine is provided soon, we will not be able to manage the supplies of water and food, medicine, as well as evacuated people safely. We follow our duty as Ukrainian military. Our soldiers are struggling bravely, and now we address the whole world society and the humanitarian mission fulfill there, because many of them were established exactly to solve such kind of humanitarian collapse we have in Mariupol now. Today is the time for determined actions. The delay can cost more and more human lives, and the world, the Europe, will heal for centuries. Create a no-fly zone over Ukraine, support with the modern weapon, organize the humanitarian aid for the civil people, We from side will provide the kinds of support of the international aid to protect Mariupol, its people. During the historical time, we need to stop the aggressor together, saving Mariupol, saving the Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
So it was a very interesting speech. He gave a statement that the citizens and the defenders of Mariupol are starting to run out of food and water, which will suggest that this siege will start going into a desperate struggle to see how long the defenders can hold. My position on Mariupol, since they've been encircled and it was confirmed, is that the city of Mariupol would probably not hold too long, but they are holding beyond my expectations at this point. And so, however longer they can hold on, they're tying up a whole bunch of extra resources that can be used elsewhere. And so now I'm going to talk about a small thing that I saw today on other maps, but I didn't want to change too much on my map because I don't really have any information to show this. But you could see that this front line moved from about here. I'm talking about this one that goes east to west. It moved from about here to here. And that's because on a map today, I saw that they were moving up to this yellow defensive line that I drew out on this map like a week ago or so. And I believe that this is something that will be happening soon, but I don't really know if it's happening now. And so that being said, I moved the front line up a little, just so that way if it is happening, it's being documented a little bit. And I showed, once again, in the green line, the road of advance that the Russians are probably taking. Because they don't have to push them all back across the whole thing. They just have to break through in this center spot and cut off these two sides of this bulge from each other. And the Ukrainians will go, man, we're surrounded on three sides in two different areas, and so we need to fall back to a position that we can defend. And so they'll most likely fall back to this yellow line that stretches from Zaporizhia to the border near Donetsk. So that being said, I believe that this situation has kind of been predicted, so it's not really a bad situation. The Ukrainians aren't really losing much. They're just losing some small villages along the way, so there's nothing really strategic being lost. So it's not, like, while it's a lot of land, it's not going to be anything severe to the Ukrainian war effort. Moving on from that, we can see that there was an armored train moving through Melitopol today. Just show you all the video. It pretty much explains itself.
Пидорасы. Пошли нахуй, пидорасы. Пидорасы. Ёбаные пидорасы. Слава Украине! Слава Украине! Слава Украине! Пидорасы! Слава Украине! Пидорасы!
It's just really weird to me, really, that they're using armored trains. You'd believe that the world had moved beyond armored trains, considering that weapons have advanced so much and a train must follow a predictable route. I mean, like, you can even see the railroad tracks on this map kind of outlined in the light gray. So you know where it's going. I mean, like, you know, you can just look at satellite footage, and if it's moving out of a depot and it's moving north, you know it must follow this line. And so you can just get some missiles, you know, from an aircraft and just drop the missiles from about 20 miles away and destroy the armored trains. I don't really know what the point of that thing is, but maybe it's just there to prove a statement. I don't really know, because I don't really see in the modern world a way for an armored train to be effective, but I may be wrong. There may be some reason that it's there and being used. So moving on from that, we're finally going to move on to the area around Mykolaiv, which has had a decent bit happen today. First, we can see that there has been a third captured Panzer over the past 2 days. This is the first one today, but there was 2 captured yesterday. I'll show you all the video.
Третий панцирник за 10 дней войны уничтожили. Тоже был обстрелян. Сюда доехал и все. Все закончилось для него. Сейчас мы его уничтожим.
So you can see that that's really interesting that they're capturing a lot of the higher tech Russian AA equipment. I don't really know why that's happening and what the Russians are doing to allow that to happen, because you would think that they would not want their best value AA assets to just go abandoned, but apparently they don't really have that much of a problem with it. So now we're going to move on into the area of Mykolaiv. We can see that in Mykolaiv there has been some damage after a bombardment. Show you all the video real quick. It's very explanatory. Just simply damage after artillery bombardment. But as can be seen, the damage is becoming somewhat extensive to Mykolaiv as this battle continues for the city. Moving on from that, we can see that there was a grad barrage overnight that probably led to the damage inside of the city. And I'll show you all the video right now. I'm sorry, this is actually a grad barrage during the day.
Балабановку нахуй сносят. Пидоры прям по жилым домам хуярят.
So as you can see, the damage may have been caused in the later video from the barrage that happened during that day, but I believe we also have a video of a barrage. Yes, we do have a barrage happening at night. It's in this video right here. And it appears that the Russians are continuously bombarding this city day and night to deprive the defenders of sleep, and also try and weaken up their positions so that way the Russians will have an easier time trying to move through the destroyed town by the time they get done bombarding it. But that is nonetheless stopping the Ukrainian defenders from protecting their city. As we can see in these two bits of footage, it appears that the cops are getting involved with the direct fighting, as it appears that they're using a cord anti-tank weapon against Russian vehicles. I'll pull that back to the front again so that you can see it right there. And you can see the rocket way out there where my mouse is. And boom, it hit a vehicle.
Yes.
So anyways, the cops are getting involved. So, you know, that's really interesting to me, that when push comes to shove and your country is invaded, like in Ukraine, the cops also become a form of a paramilitary unit. I would really equate the military, although those police units right there looked much more equipped than normal. The police would probably end up being some kind of light infantry, if anything. Moving on from that, finally we have some Russian units being destroyed by Ukrainian paratroopers in Mykolaiv today. I'll show you all that video.
Вот такая колонна техники противника. Давайте быстро оружие, все забираем. Пулемети, автомати, гранатомети, все нахуй. Вон пулемет валяється, заберіть пулемет. Вон. Блядь, вон, сука. Боги нахуй. Ну де же, блядь? Підарасів нахуй. Там розбита вся колона.
Anyways, as you can see, the damage that the Ukrainians inflicted on the Russians near Mykolaiv. I believe that it may have actually been Nikolaev. They say it's in the Lugansk region, but I have seen Mykolaiv been called Nikolaev before in another one, so I'm not really sure. Maybe that's a conflict in, you know, like location. It could be in Lugansk, or Mykolaiv for all I know now that I looked at the title again. But we do know that the Ukrainian paratroopers did wipe out a armored column of APCs today, either in Mykolaiv or somewhere in the Luhansk region. Now, finally, moving on to the news that a lot of people have probably been wanting to hear, because there hasn't been a lot of naval news on this channel, and I don't think there's been a lot of naval news on other channels, because information about that isn't forthcoming and easy to find. But today we've seen a video, well, a picture actually, of a Russian warship burning at sea, right out there. And I was wondering what this thing was when I first saw it. And I can't really tell. But I was told today by Ukrainian sources and a few Western sources that it was the Russian stealth corvette, the Vasily Baikov. And I'll show you all a picture of that. I have it from Wikipedia. That's what it looks like. Now, to be honest, I don't really think that silhouette of that ship in the video matched the description of what this stealth corvette looks like in this small picture. I'm sorry that's so small, but that's the only picture I could find of it. So maybe it was a different ship and that was a merchant ship that got hit. I don't know, but from what I could tell, a lot of people were saying that that was the Vasily Baikov. So if it is, that's what that stealth corvette looked like before it sank, and if it isn't, then I'll try and get some more information on that, because I'm not really sure if that was the same ship. If you look at the silhouette, it didn't look the same. So maybe it was an entirely different ship. Maybe a merchant ship got sank on the same day that that one got sank. Anyways, last night we do see something to confirm that the Ukrainians maybe sunk that ship, but it wasn't in that video, and that's that an MLRS in Odessa was firing at the sea last night, a Ukrainian one, apparently at a Russian patrol vessel, maybe the Vasily Baikov.
Августин, огонь. Праздничный салют. Сейчас посмотрим.
Не, а там есть наїсть?
А хуй його знає, ідіть подивіться. Горить щось? Попали?
So, if it happens to be the case to that video, and I'll show it to y'all again so that way y'all can make up your own minds if that did look like the Vasily Baikov, because to me it just didn't. But we'll look at it again. You see, here's why I'm saying it's not. Is that right here, it looks like the stern of a merchant ship, where the bridge would be, and you have the exhaust funnel, if you want to call it that, behind the bridge, on that kind of like conning tower type of like superstructure. And then at the front, you have a elevated bow, and in between there would be a cargo hold. And it kind of looks like that would be supported because you have two masts. It looks like maybe there's some cranes in the middle of the ship. So to me, that looks like kind of more like a merchant ship than a stealth corvette. But I don't know, maybe because there's a bit of an illusion going on with the sea, you know, how the light's reflecting off of it and stuff. Maybe it is the Vasily Baikov, but I still feel like it's a stretch. So if we can find video of the Vasily Baikov sinking, because it's got a story to back it up, you know, an MLRS was firing into the sea. They claimed that a Russian corvette was destroyed. I would just like to see a more evidential video, if that's a good word to use, showing that it actually was the Vasily Baikov instead of this merchant ship that appears to be in this video. So anyways, moving on from that, we have, I believe, covered all the topics today, except for these two. We still have two more to go, and then I'll go to answering questions. So here we can see some foreign volunteers from around the world. They're wearing patches to show that they're from around the world. We have a Brazilian, it appears we have a Portuguese, and I can't tell where this guy is from, because it looks like he's not wearing a flag like the rest of them. Maybe that is a flag, but I don't know of a flag of a country that's in camo, with anything black on it. So, as far as I know, I don't really think that there's a country with that kind of flag. But we know that there's a Portuguese man and a Brazilian in the same picture. So that's good on them. Maybe they're all from like the same background and language. Maybe they all speak Portuguese. So going off of that, he's either Brazilian or Portuguese, considering he's with the rest of the Portuguese-speaking volunteers. But it's very good to know that there's people all around the world, just like Pavel, who are doing their part to help fight this war. And hopefully with all of their combined efforts and help and support from the West, Ukraine can win this war sooner than later and begin the process of rebuilding their country better than it looked before the war. That being said, we're going to move on to our last thing, which is Swedish anti-tank missiles have arrived, and here's a picture to prove it. Actually, a couple of pictures. We can see right here that this is some kind of trailer that's loaded with Swedish equipment. We can see the anti-tank launchers here. And hopefully those will be put to good use very soon, because it seems like the Ukrainians always need a little bit of tank-busting equipment, considering that the Russians rely so much on tanks and armored vehicles. And so hopefully we'll start seeing a few more armored vehicles destroyed across the battlefield than we already do, which are already in large numbers. And so now that I've covered all the news from around all the fronts today, I'm going to answer some questions. They forced all of our soldiers to get the vaccine, so they get mild carditis, and a lot of them are vaccine injured right now. I know 5 people. I don't really know much about the vaccine or the effectiveness of it, so I'm gonna kind of move on past that one. Russia has no chance of winning. I have to agree at this point, and it's not due to them like outnumbering the Ukrainians, because every time I talk to anyone, you know, in my family, and it's not to like rat on them or anything, it's just that they don't really look into it in depth. They always go, well, Russia outnumbers Ukraine, and it's like they outnumber them on paper, you know. And if you look at the supply situation, there's no way for them to win, because although you can have like 100,000 soldiers, if you can only feed 1,000 of them, that means only 1,000 of them are useful, because the other 99,000 of them are going to starve, or they're going to run off because they're not getting food, you know, or something. But they're not going to be used, because they're not going to be around by the time you need them. And so you can only field 1,000 of them out of that 100,000 group, because you can only feed 1,000 of them. And so it doesn't matter how many units Russia has. If they can only support like 120 BTGs, that's all they can use on the ground, is 120 BTGs. And I think a lot of people don't really get that. Is that you can't just fight wars on unicorn piss and magic. You require food, supplies, and ammo, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well to keep this thing going. So that being said, I'm going to move on. Urban warfare is in the U.S. Army. We train hard in urban warfare. Yes, y'all do. I have a friend who's in the U.S. Army, and they trained a lot in urban warfare from what I heard. I didn't really get a lot of details from him. He just said that they trained a lot. It seemed like he didn't really like basic that much. I don't really think anyone does. So, you know, I didn't really push him on it, because he seemed like he was very unhappy with it. The SEAL team is on the way. Well, I mean, like, that's neat if they are. I'm not really sure if that would be a thing we do, because that'd pretty much be a declaration of war on our part. How many of the nukes work? How many rockets work to launch? How many warheads even still work? Let's pull that up. How many Russian nukes are operable? Usually a lot of stuff is public info like that. Experts estimate around 1,500 Russian warheads are currently deployed, meaning sighted at missile and bomber bases or on submarines at sea. Now let's pull this up. How many nukes does Russia have? Let's see. Okay, now here's the funny thing too about nukes, is that their overall number, according to this, because I knew that one was very small, it's much larger, is 6,257. They have 6,257 nukes, and out of all those, around 1,500 are active. And so while the numbers are always so large on paper, the amount that they can actually use is like a fifth of that, or less. Although 1,500 nukes isn't like a small number, you know, that's still enough to wipe out the United States. If they were to just use those to carpet the whole entire country, it'd wipe us out. But still, I mean, like, you know, it's a lot less than 6,200, 6,300 really. And so, going off of that, you know, it's another thing, like, on paper, it looks great. They have a huge number, but in actual usable terms, it's a lot smaller. Really, honestly, Russia's just an unimpressive country. Very impressive on paper, militarily, but once you actually get into how everything works, it's not impressive at all. I don't know what he's doing on the ground. Oh, man, the chat's blowing up. Keep chatting, y'all. I'll try and get to as much as possible. Is the Odessa offensive even still feasible at this point? We saw some Russian naval landing force working on day 8 in the area, but we haven't seen anything happen, so I don't know. I mean, I really can't answer that question. I think the Russians may have abandoned that at this point, or they're waiting for the situation that's ongoing right now to maybe improve, if they have information to suggest that, to then land an invasion at Odessa, but I just can't tell anymore, really. Like, I can't, it could go either way at this point. They may try and do it, but also they may not. So, I'm sorry I can't really answer that question that well, because I just don't really know. 160,000 volunteers? I think the last time I heard it was 16,000. How many volunteers have entered Ukraine? spelled entered. Said more than 20,000 people have volunteered to fight in Ukraine. So I think that number's a little high, because if 160,000 of them just entered the country yesterday, the Ukrainian defense force, the Ukrainian ground forces would have doubled in size overnight. And I don't really think that's what happened. But I mean, like, that's good that they got 20,000 of them. That's still great. 200,000 Russians is less than 1 per square mile. LOL. I don't know what that's in reference to. The growth of your channel is big, just as big as we appreciate the information you share. Thank you, Enforcer. Oh, thank you so much. That was a very nice little comment, man. I thank you for that. Let's see. We've also been funding trillions into subterranean warfare. I don't know anything about that. So I'm sorry. I can't really comment on that. Basic sucks for everyone. It does. I've never heard anyone come out of Basic and say they had a fun time. I mean, like, the whole point of Basic is not to have a fun time. So, obviously no one's come out and said, oh, I loved Basic, it was the funnest thing on earth. Russians no chance to win 100% more countries support in Ukraine. Yes, that's entirely true. No one supports Russia right now. China's on the fence, but they don't even really support them either. No one supports Russia. Given that Putin has gone full Chancellor of Germany in 1939, are there some sensible powers in the Kremlin? I mean, maybe. I don't really know. I mean, like, you got Sergei Shoigu, which is always the guy I look at, because he's like the kind of like, I believe he's like the secretary of the armed forces or something. No, he's not the secretary. He's the general or something of the armed forces, whatever title they give him in Russia. And I always look at him and I'm like, if anyone was to overthrow the government, he would probably be in the best position to do it. But I just don't really know. Ukraine needs more rifles then? Maybe. I don't really know the actual logistical situation of the Ukrainians, because no information about what the Ukrainians are doing is readily available, and I also don't like to share it if I can find any, because all that does is help out the Russians. So I don't really know if they need more rifles or not. They may have a huge surplus of them, and they may not. I don't really know. Z is much more than an identifier. No, it's just an identifier. It's kind of like the marks that we put on coalition vehicles that entered Iraq. It's just to make sure that we know who's friendly and who's not, and that's what the Russians are doing, so that way they don't get shot at by their own troops. Basic sucks when you're in it, but comical after you complete it. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that too. One friend though, he just hated it afterwards as well. And I remember one guy, he went in the Navy. And he came back and he was like, man, I told myself I wouldn't cry if I went to basic. He knew it was going to be hard, but he said he wasn't going to cry. He said, man, I broke down crying on the third day. It was so funny to hear. I haven't been in the military, so fortunately and unfortunately, I haven't had to go through that. But I hear that the military is an interesting experience that people love and hate all at the same time, because people love what they're doing, but they also hate the structure and kind of bureaucracy of the military, I guess you could say. I mean, like, even my granddad, before he died, he served in the Air Force for a short time in the 50s. He was talking about how much the service sucked back then due to some of the rules and stuff like that. But he said it was still a job that had to be done, and he was proud for doing it. He just didn't really like some of the rules and stuff in the Air Force and how they ran things in the end. But that's the way it is in most militaries. When you look at the U.S. military compared to the Russian military, the U.S. military is living high and well, compared to the Russians. And, I won't go into details. That's going down a rabbit hole, and that'll just eat up a lot of time I could use to answer more questions. So hopefully I answered that question well, and it was a pretty good comment. Why didn't Ukraine have Iron Dome? Iron Dome, I believe, is a pretty expensive program. We can pull that up, though, and find out. How much did the Iron Dome cost? Let's see. 10 batteries deployed, and they're 50 million per battery, and 100,000. Well, 100,000 isn't much per interception, really, but let's do the math on that. If they have 10 of them, and they cost 50 million a pop, 50 million times 10, so we get $500 million. I mean, that's not a lot, really. It would have done them a great advantage to have some kind of Iron Dome system with that kind of cost involved. So I don't really know why they didn't do it. That's a good question. I think that they should start looking into that after the war is over, so that way, if Russia tries anything smart again, they can already have that ready. Putin will get frustrated and launch a tactical nuke. I'm kind of going either way on that. I mean, like, the guy's going unhinged, so I could see that happening. But at the same time, That would be like unheard of for a country to launch a nuke into a non-nuclear country just to prove a point or to win some kind of war or something. That would be crazy. But you know, I'm not going to rule it out. It might happen. And I'm just going to leave that at that. There's really not much I can add to that. Yes, 143,000 Ukrainian men returned to the country to fight. Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you for clearing that up, man. I didn't know that you were talking about Ukrainians who returned. I thought you were just talking about like foreign volunteers that were not Ukrainian citizens. So now I get you. Thank you, man. At this stage, Ukraine could end up taking over Moscow. Oh man, I don't really think they would want to, because they're going to be in bad. Even though they could win, they'll be in bad shape at the end of this war. They'll be in better shape than the Russians, but it won't be ideal shape. And so, you know, I mean, like I know that's just kind of like maybe a bit of exaggeration, but I do not think they would try and undergo going all the way to Moscow and taking over the country. And then if they did that, they probably would get nuked. Yeah, but don't forget Russia has Zircon hypersonic missile. I mean, yeah, but you know, is that like a T-14 kind of thing where they got like 2 of them, but they're in testing? You know, I don't really know. So you know, I mean, like I can not forget. Yeah, I won't forget it, but I'm not really sure if that's an actual thing that they have a lot of that is usable. Because you know they got T-14s, but they only got 14 of them, and they're, you know, that's not enough of them to be used, and most of them are still kind of like prototypes that they're still testing to a degree. Yeah, like that number is correct. How many vacuum bombs and cluster bombs do they know Russia had? Well, let's pull that up. I really don't know the exact number. How many cluster bombs? Oh, I'm misspelling everything. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm kind of tired still. And everyone's gonna be wishing me good sleep, but you know I don't get any ever. How many cluster bombs does Russia have? Let's just get that number and see. I'm sure it's a decent amount. Apparently there's no numbers on that. Maybe they keep that classified considering that they're war crimes and they probably don't want anyone to know they still have them, or how many of them they have. So sadly I couldn't get a number on that. You can't win a war without logistics. Putin was KGB and has no idea how to win a war. He's a spy henchman. Yeah, you know, I can agree with that entirely. It's kind of like how Stalin thought you could win a war just by having multiple different convoluted looking fronts on paper, and then the logistics fell apart then. Like, I just want to remind y'all this, okay? Because I keep on talking about the Winter War, and if no one's ever heard about the Winter War or actually looked at the figures involved in the Winter War, you're thinking probably that it may be an outlandish assumption, and I assure you entirely that it's not at all. And so I'm gonna pull this up. I'm gonna compare the numbers for you of what the Finnish had versus what the Russians had, at least according to Wikipedia. So the Finnish had a strength of around 300,000 to 340,000 men. They had 32 tanks and 114 aircraft. The Russians had 425,000 troops to 760,000 troops. So on the low end, it was kind of like Russia right now. They outnumbered them just enough, but not a lot. And then on the high end, they outnumbered them more than 2 to 1. They had 2,514 tanks at the minimum compared to 32 tanks that the Finnish had. Or they had something involved around 6,500 tanks compared to 32 Finnish tanks. And they also had 3,880 aircraft compared to Finland's 114. And at the end of this war, the Russians lost around 150,000 men. The Finnish lost 26,000. And let me make sure this is correct. The Russians lost 1,200 to 3,500 tanks and 261 to 515 aircraft. Now, the Finnish lost almost all their tanks and half their aircraft, but nonetheless, compared to the losses that the Russians took, which was in the thousands, and they only lost 30 tanks and 25,000 men, you can start to see why I'm saying that it doesn't really matter if you outnumber a country or not, because back then, the Soviets, just by the numbers alone, should have steamrolled them. But once you got into the details of how that war was being fought and how well the logistics were being operated, everything fell apart for the Russians, and they just wound up dying in the middle of this frozen wasteland in between them and Finland, just north of St. Petersburg, and they lost. So that's why I have a lot of hope for Ukraine, and I believe that with things going the way they are, and if they keep going this way, they may win. So that being said, we'll move on. I'd argue we did, they did, and oh, that's a chat and discussion. I haven't been following that. I'm sorry. Military strength is all about having the right people with the right training and the right equipment. This is why a conscript army will always fall to a professional army. Entirely true. Professional armies are always better than a conscript army. We all need more rifles. We do need more rifles. The whole entire world does. I believe that arms are not really a bad thing. I'm not like an NRA member or anything, and I'm not getting political about this, but arms in terms of having a public that's just already well armed to defend the country, just as a kind of like symbolic thing, if anything, I believe is critically important to national defense. Because you can see in Ukraine, when Russia invaded, people had to line up and wait to get guns when they could have already had guns. So, you know, that being said, I believe it's pretty beneficial for civilians to already have guns in the first place, so that way you have some kind of, at least organized resistance behind the lines, or disorganized resistance. It doesn't really matter, because whatever it'd be some kind of resistance. Moving on from that, wasn't letter Z initially for Western divisions? I'm not really sure how they divided that stuff up. What the West is sending is mainly anti-tank, anti-air missiles, not really seeing guns. I have not seen in any videos from the West sending weapons. I've heard that I believe it was the Dutch or the Belgians were sending some kind of assault rifles to Ukraine. Some of these Russian soldiers don't have the will to fight. That's true. Praying for Ukraine. I do too. I hope that Ukraine will win this war, and it will win it soon. And I mean soon as in a couple of weeks. Logistics aren't going good for Ukraine since they bleed by siege bombardments. Maybe. That may be true. I don't really know about the Ukrainian logistical situation, though, and I'm assuming that they probably are pulling supplies from around the country in the areas that aren't actually being attacked over here in the western side of the country to try and supply the eastern side. But then again, that's all kind of like my assumption, so they're not entirely true, and don't quote me on that, and don't hold me to it, because they're just my opinions. Let's see. How many casualties are you expecting to see on both sides at the end of the war? I can't really say, because, you know, we don't really know how long this war will go for anymore. It could go on for weeks, it could go on for months. It could go on for years, although I'm not really seeing that. Something will happen within probably months. So it'll just depend on how long this war is going and how things develop on the ground as they go. Because it could be that this casualty statistic is up in the hundreds of thousands for both sides combined. Who really knows? I remember the drag. I don't know what that's about. You don't think that that rig they put in space to deflect asteroids was a true story, do you? I don't know what that is about. I think you're talking about that thing that flew out to the comet and tried to redirect it. Are the Russians using cauldron tactics? Let me pull that up real quick, because I'm going to be honest with you. I have never heard that term before. Cauldron tactics. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. Apparently this is what is a cauldron tactic, which is just a pocket. Yeah, I mean, like, they were trying to... I call that an encirclement or a siege, but yes, they were trying to use that in the first days of the war, and now it appears to be unsuccessful, so now they're going on to just bombarding and then trying to roll through the rubble. Let's see, what else do we have? I'm sorry if I say someone pointed that out last night, and I've been thinking about that ever since. I'm convinced the USA would mop the floor with Russia. Oh, they would, no question. At this point, looking at how poorly they're performing against a country that had like a tenth of their military budget and supposedly was outgunned and outmanned, they're really holding their ground against the Russians. So that being said, we're going to get to the next one. Kyiv just took in a convoy of tanks past Victory Square. Oh, that's cool. Let's try and make sure not to say exactly where it happened, because that gives the Russians a little bit of an advantage. But I do thank you for that information. It's good to know that they are taking in a convoy of tanks. Hopefully Ukrainian tanks. Hopefully you're not saying that those were Russian tanks that just rolled through Victory Square near the Maidan. Hopefully not. I'll talk about what I want to. News is part of all of it. Did I hurt your little feelings? I don't know who you're talking to. You're not hurting my feelings. It's just that I don't talk about that stuff. But I don't know who you're talking to. So I will leave that alone for now. Let's see. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. Oh, I don't get into American politics. Well, I mean, like, everyone hates the NRA, really. I will say that, though. What do you think of Syrian troops helping out Russia? They're not going to do anything. I mean, like, really. You know, I'm not saying anything about you, but like, people are like trying to make out the Syrians to be like these like old-fashioned kind of like Persian mercenaries. Like, come on now. I mean, like, you know, the people who are trying to peddle this story, you know, thank you for asking the question. It's a great question because, you know, it's something new that's happened. But the people who are trying to make out the Syrians to be good fighters, I mean, it's been 9 years and they haven't come up with any victories at all in Syria that actually count. They haven't ended the civil war in like 9 years at this point or more. I believe it's on, yeah, it's on its 10th year at this point. And they still haven't solved it. And I don't think these people are good fighters because when you look at the footage of them fighting in the streets, they have like no tactical skills whatsoever at all. They don't really know how to manage things in city warfare. They just hold the machine gun at their hip and then just spray and like pretty much pray. There's like no tactics to what they do. I think those people are just more of like a morale support thing for the Russians than anything because I don't believe they'll amount to much. It's not like 10 years of war have made them better fighters. They still have as little training now as they did at the beginning. And it's just that it's been going on for so long that now they are just ingrained that that's the way they fight. So I don't really think they're going to do much. But thank you for the question, AWSD. That was a good one. Ukraine has USA Logistics. They probably do. I don't really know what the Ukrainian logistical situation is like. I've said that so many times tonight. I'm sorry, y'all. But I don't really know what their situation looks like exactly, but it's probably very similar to that. So let's see what else we have. A U.S. arms company sent small arms ammo. Yes, I saw that. It was like 1 million rounds, and that was really cool because I actually think I knew someone who worked for that company. The Russian used scout vehicles to find the front lines. When you shoot at the vehicle, they target the artillery at you and pound you to... We had scout units and Humvees to act as screens. Interesting. That's some interesting news. The hardest question, no, it depends on two factors. Is Putin... Oh, that's a chat in the conversation. Is a ceasefire kind of like timeout? Yeah, it kind of is. You know, if you want to... Yeah, I mean, like, that's pretty much what it is. If two sides agree to a ceasefire, it's kind of like a timeout. Everyone just stops fighting for a bit, and they just sit there for a while. And you know what I think the Russians may be doing with these ceasefires is that they may be trying to buy themselves a couple of hours of time where their units aren't using up as much supplies, so they can try and slowly fix their situation over ceasefires, multiple ceasefires that only last a few hours, that they then break to keep pressures on the Ukrainians still, but at the same time they try and keep pressure off of their units just for a few hours, so that way the supply problem can start to become mitigated a little bit more. But then again, that's all my opinion. That's just what I'm thinking, and that may not be true. Let's see. Russians have a history of losing due to incompetence. They do. They do. They almost lost World War II due to incompetence, and if it wasn't for the U.S. providing a Lend-Lease, and the Lend-Lease cannot be overstated, because we didn't provide tanks, we provided trucks. And I've been saying this whole time, you know, this is like my whole thing on this channel, that logistics is so much more important than actual tanks on the front lines. And that's really true. And so they were losing until we started providing them with hundreds of thousands of trucks. And then you started to see that the Russians were winning because they actually fixed their supply line issues purely by the Americans. And if you pull up Russian logistics pictures in World War II, Russian logistics World War II, and we just look at the images, we'll notice a trend probably. Let me see if I can find some pictures of it, though. Okay, yes, look at this. All right? All these vehicles are American, and these are operated by the Russians, I believe. Wait a minute, is this wrong? No, this is a U.S. Army truck convoy. God, man, that sucks. Where's a picture that I can show? Russian trucks, maybe. World War II. Maybe it'll show us some pictures of convoys then. Okay, look at this. This is a Katusha on a Studebaker chassis. This was an American truck that was sent over. And then you have these little gas trucks, which they produced like a couple of, like 10,000 something of, like around 40,000 during the whole war. But there you go. ZIL 157. I think that's a Studebaker, if I'm correct. That they just... No, actually that is a ZIL 157. That's their own homemade truck. I feel like I would have done a better job pulling up the numbers. That's a Studebaker. This is a Studebaker right here. I believe that's also a Studebaker. What else do we have? Oh yeah, this looks like a... Oh, well, that is an American scout vehicle. Well, an American car. I'm sorry about that. I'm getting things mixed up. I'm getting really tired right now. But sadly, I can't get a lot of pictures. I'll have to get y'all the figures on that for tomorrow's stream if I can. So that way I can kind of like explain how much the Lend-Lease helped them win that war. It can't be overstated how much it did. But anyways, next question. Hey man, have you thought about the possibility of China attacking Quad Alliance naval bases and invading Taiwan? Or do you think they're really playing neutral? Because I don't buy it. I think they're playing neutral right now because they just looked at the amount of economic sanctions that have been levied against them. And if you look at the international trade situation with China, and how they import and export from around the world, the United States and the European Union make up the entirety of the trade profits that they get from around the world. If the United States and the European Union almost completely stopped doing trade with them, they would be breaking even on their international trade, or they'd be in a trade deficit of several $billions a year, and it would cut out a decent amount of the profits that the Chinese make, the GDP that they have, and so they couldn't really afford to do anything with Taiwan because they've seen the economic sanctions levied against Russia. And we all know that even though it wouldn't make economic sense to levy those sanctions against China, they would probably just happen because the world's response to something so egregious as them trying to invade Taiwan would make sanctions very swift and very harsh. And so I believe that they've seen what happened to Russia, and they're like, we're going to sit back for a bit and just let this Taiwan situation sit still because we don't need that island right now. We don't really need it later. We just want it because it's part of our kind of like national scope, if you want to call it that. So moving on from that, I think I'm going to answer a few more questions, then we'll end the stream. Hit the like button. Thank you. Yeah, if everyone likes the news, make sure to hit the like button. It gets it out to more people in the future. And if you like the news, make sure to join the Discord, because sometimes people get unsubscribed from the channel. And joining the Discord will make sure that you're always notified when this news is going live, which it always goes live at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So that being said, 3D printed bombs are used by drones. I've seen that. Putin will look for a face-saving way out. But nuking them, it won't be a face-saving way out. That would be worse. That would be a worse solution. Because you can't even justify that to the Russian public. Because they'd be like, what in the hell happened for us to nuke a country and justify it? Because even in Russia, nuclear war, nukes used at all is a really bad thing. Like no one in the world thinks that using a nuke is a good idea. And so if you nuke someone, it's like, how in the world could you even justify that to your own people who supported you? They would look at you like a monster if you did that, because there's really no way you can justify that. Oh man, there it went. I was going to answer that one. Where'd it go? Dang it, I think I lost it. Yeah, I think I lost it. I'm sorry, y'all. I'll answer 2 more questions down here, and then we'll call it a night. Putin will pay for this with the assets that were frozen, plus taxes on their citizens to pay reparations for their war crimes. Maybe. I'm not really... it could go either way. I'm not really sure on that one. But that's a pretty good take on it. I smashed that like and sub. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you so much. I'm very appreciative of everyone who likes my efforts that I put into this news, and I hope you all have all enjoyed it. And I guess that's a really good note to end this on. If you're still watching this stream and you've enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe, because this comes on every day at 10 p.m. Eastern time, and it will be until the war ends. I appreciate all of your questions so much. I hate that I can't get to them. Back in the day when these streams were a lot smaller, I could get to them all, and then I started feeling really bad about not getting to all of them, because the amount of comments is in the thousands now. And I still hate that. I feel really bad every night. I leave a lot of people hanging with their questions, and they're all good questions that deserve answers, but I sadly just don't have the time to answer them all. So I want y'all to know I'm sorry I can't answer your questions if I didn't get to them, but I'm so thankful that all of y'all have come around to listen to the news, and I hope y'all found something informative and informational about it. So I thank y'all all so much for being here, and I wish y'all a great night, and I'll see y'all all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern time for the Day 13 update, where Ukraine will probably still hold the same front lines it held today. Thank you so much, and I'll see y'all all around.